Question 1. How would you describe the manner in which Hardy uses the idea of destiny within his novel? One of the overarching questions the reader is forced to address throughout the book is whether Tess's hardships are inflicted by destiny or human error. In many cases, it can be argued that Tess simply has bad luck, and every hardship she stomachs is fate or her destiny. The paramount example of this is Tess's rape. She ultimately had no option but to accept Alex's offer of riding her back to the estate because the other girls she was with were starting to turn against her. She had done everything in her power to assure her safety that night, which is evident through her staying at the dance hall for hours so that she did not have to walk home alone or ride back with Alec, displaying her trust towards him from that early stage. This example proves she could not defeat her fate and that this incident was doomed to happen. It may also be argued that having her baby was destined because without the birth and death of her child, she would not be confronted with all of the other hardships she endures later on. This is because she would not have left for Dairyman Crick's farm, which was an attempt to find new beginnings, and where she also officially met Angel, who ultimately hurt her further. However, all of this is not caused solely by abstract fate, but instead some can be blamed on human error. Although many of these actions were not her fault, they still could have been stopped. Most will agree that the rape was not her fault at all because it can be blamed. However, it can be blamed on her father and the inheritance of his uppity manner. He was infatuated with the thought of wealth and higher social class and disregarded the danger he was placing his daughter in by eventually sending her to work on a estate far away from any family and friends and in an area she was unfamiliar with. This was not destiny that caused this, but instead her father's selfishness. Moreover, Tess's own people, as described by Hardy, expressed the rape with the statement, "It was to be, there lay the pity of it," at the end of phase 1. This still poses the question of whether or not it was fate or free will, because they could be implying that it is pity Tess was fated to get raped, or that it is a pity people use this as an excuse because it could have been stopped, especially in my opinion by her mother, who intuitively felt something bad was going to happen, yet still allowed her daughter to go to the estate. Moreover, although no one drove the baby to sickness, it is still a possibility that it could have been saved. As bad of a man Alec is, he still offered to take care of her and ensures that she will not have to work in the fields again, and if she ever needs any clothing or anything like that, he is there to support her. Thus, the baby dying could be considered human error as she sought no help, and Alec had offered to help if she ever needed it. Finally, Tess's unsuccessful attempt to reveal her history to Angel through a note slipped under his door could also be deemed as unfortunate fate. It seems like unfortunate placement, as having a note slip under the carpet is not a likely situation, emphasizing her horrible luck and fate. It seems by this point that Tess is almost destined for bad things. However, because of the rarity of this occurrence, it can also be argued that at a subconscious level, Tess did not want Angel to know the truth, as she did not want to bear the consequences. So that is why she could have purposely slipped it under the carpet. This ambiguity may be a purposeful technique used by Hardy to keep the reader engaged and questioning the plot. One last example, traveling back to the beginning of the book, the death of Prince is such an unfortunate and unlikely event to occur that the reader from the early pages believes that Tess has horrible luck and is destined for unfortunate events. The death of Prince inspired her guilt that ultimately led to her agreeance in moving to work on the Duperville estate. Additionally, she had no choice but to do the beehive delivery, understanding that her drunk father was incapable, blaming this incident again on pure misfortune because she had no choice. Overall, in the conclusion of Phase 1, the narrator suggests that her rape and Prince's death is payback for the sins her ancestors committed, making the reader favor the argument that Tess's life was destined to be miserable from the early pages of the book. Question 3. How is Tess of the D'Urbervilles a commentary on the Victorian era? The most prominent reflection of typical societal norms during the Victorian era is displayed through the dominance of men. The most obvious example of this is Tess's rape, to which she bears all consequences. Although Tess did not consent, she's now portrayed as a sinner and being unpure, whereas the perpetrator, Alec, got off scot-free without having to worry about any implications of his own actions. His life got to simply continue as normal, whereas hers was changed and arguably ruined forever. And this just displays the sexist opinions during this era, because although none of this was her fault, she still had to bear all the consequences. Hardy also ensures the reader is aware that this occurrence is not rare, because he also uses the character of Jack Dollop in Phase 3 to convey the same message. Jack, too, ravaged a girl of her innocence, and the mother brings her weeping daughter to try to convince Jack that he must marry the girl, or else she would be considered a sinner. And the mother even claims that she should have been his mother-in-law 5 months ago, which is most likely when the rape occurred. In reinforcement of this, Angel refers to Alec as being Tess's nature by husband, showing that although she had no choice over the situation because she did not consent to having intercourse with Alec, he still had to be considered her husband, so she had no choice over who her virginity was lost to and ultimately who people would consider her husband. Another example in which men assert dominance is Angel's dominance over minor characters. Reddy, and Marian all feel incomplete without a man in their lives and allow their emotions and actions to be fully controlled by their lust and love for Angel. When it becomes evident that Angel favors Tess, this causes a lot of discord between the girls, and two of them actually end up inflicting self-harm. Reddy had attempted to drown herself, and Marian was found dead due to overconsumption of alcohol. And this is undoubtedly because they both felt worthless without the love of a man, and was jealous that Tess received this love instead. The conflicts caused by social class and wealth also accurately portray life during the Victorian era. When the parson reveals to Jack Durbeyfield that he is of a d'Urberville descent and addresses him as Sir John, Jack's whole life changes immensely. These changes are not due to any social climbing or an increase in financial stability, but instead Jack changes because he thinks he is now superior to many people. This is evident when Jack travels back home in a horse and carriage after being told of his ancestry, even though he still cannot afford such luxuries. So his wealth is ultimately all an illusion. He just believes that since he has this title of being a d'Urberville, that he is ultimately of a higher social class. He also desired to marry his daughter off to a d'Urberville, and that is why he sends Tess to ask if the d'Urbervilles can help the Durbeyfields out as they are struggling financially after the death of Prince. This is where she meets Alec, and her father's selfish desires ultimately ruin her life because, as we know, her rape changes her life forever. Social class was a very big deal during this time, and Jack greatly wanted to be looked up towards by those around him. Jack Durbeyfield clearly believes that he is entitled to great wealth just because his ancestors were of a higher social class. However, this is clearly not the case because many of the girls Tess interacts with on the farm have a similar family history, yet are still working in the fields because that does not make them wealthy. Furthermore, Angel's father wanted him to attend Cambridge to study and become a vicar like his brothers. This displays typical behavior of a man, especially a priest during this era, because you're expected to be a devout Christian and earn a university degree. And also, his father was not willing to pay for university if he was not going to then go on to become a vicar or get a respectable job, because he did not want to waste money, which displays the emphasis they put on money and how important financial success was to them. However, his father also opposes traditional views because although he expects many traditional things of his son's wife, such as being a devout Christian and a kind girl, he also desires for her to be hardworking. This was not typical of this era because often if a girl was hardworking, that meant she was poor, and women were supposed to be able to rely on their husbands for financial success.